Hey everybody, we are back with another episode of Can't Stop Snapping, the official podcast of MarvelSnapZone.com. As always, just want to go over a couple of things before we jump into today's episode. Not a lot of news this week. We're kind of in that mid-season point where there's no new patch. We've already got the new card, the new season pass, and that is unfolding as we go week by week. So not a ton to note. A couple of things I will note, though, is that we've essentially gotten confirmation through messages that have been given in the Discord or websites that have quoted Ben Rode or have had interviews with developers at Second Dinner. It sounds like that we will be getting collector's tokens, which again will be a resource that we can use to unlock specific cards instead of random cards in pools, and we will be getting friendly matches before the end of the year. Sounds like both of those are targeted before end of year. We're about 5 to 6 weeks before the end of the year right now, so should see a patch or two in that time frame that introduces these. I'm interested to see if they release both features at once or if they do kind of incrementally one feature and then the next a few weeks later. Time will tell. With all that being said, and without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. Hey everybody, we are back with another episode of Can't Stop Snapping, the official podcast of MarvelSnapZone.com. We are about midway through November at the time of recording of this, which means we're coming up on halfway through the November season pass, Warriors of Wakanda. We've all been enjoying that a lot. There's not a ton of new news. There's no new patches or updates this week. So today on the podcast, we wanted to discuss a variety of topics. As always, I am joined by a wonderful guest host, a first-time guest host. I am joined today by YouCanCallMeAl. Al, thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure. I've listened to the podcast since it started, so I'm a big fan, and I'm glad to finally be on here and give some opinions.
Awesome. Well, we are very glad to have you. So, as you and me were talking before recording, we've just come up with a variety of topics we want to cover today and just share our thoughts and ideas about some things that maybe people are wondering about with Marvel Snap and both the present and the future. So, before we dive into that, I just want to give you a second at being a first-time guest host. Just tell us a little bit about, why Marvel Snap, why did you start playing it, what drove you to content creation for Marvel Snap, and what do you love about the game?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've played over the years many different card games, and they've all got different, good things about them. Marvel Snap, for me, when I saw how the game worked, all the aspects of the game, it kind of was an amalgamation of all the good things about the game. So, the artwork, the premium artwork is sort of similar to Gwent in a sense. They had fantastic artwork there. The snappy, quick gameplay that made Hearthstone so successful. The snapping mechanic, which is, very similar to what you do in poker, which again is probably why that, game stood the test of time. So it just kind of pulls together some of these really good components for other card games. And so, it's just a natural fit really for me to want to play it.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, a lot of us share kind of that same amalgamation of backgrounds of different games, and Marvel Snap just kind of scratches that itch for a lot of the things that, each one of them does well in a certain way, but it kind of brings them together in one game.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Well, awesome. Let's dive into our first topic today. First thing we want to talk about is something that was in the news this week, which is we had the nominations for the Game Awards. For those who may not know, the Game Awards are kind of like the Grammys or the Oscars or, just an awards ceremony, but for the gaming industry. So you have things like Best Game of the Year, Best Game Direction, Best Game Music, Best Performance for somebody who does voice acting for a video game, etc. And they do have a category for Best Mobile Game, and they nominated 5 games, and one of those was Marvel Snap. So very exciting for the team at Second Dinner. I saw a lot of them, posting on social media, very excited about this. And I just think it's really cool. Obviously the game's only been released for a couple of weeks here, but Al, what are your first impressions? What do you think about this nomination?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's fantastic news, really. I mean, to say two things really come to mind for me. One, I think it's great for, getting new content. Obviously, it'll be good for the developers to, it'll bring new players in, so they'll get more revenue to make new content. It's great for content creators. We'll get, more people looking at our content, which is fantastic. And obviously, I'm sure the developers themselves are very proud of it. I'm sure, it's a big, point of pride for them. But also, I just think that it just shows that the general gaming community is, I mean, I don't know who makes the nominations, but whoever it is, I'm assuming they have the pulse on what people are enjoying in the gaming industry, and it just shows that people are paying attention to it. They've noticed it. There weren't any other card games in that category, I don't think. I'm not sure if there were many card games across the entire sort of award, across all the awards. So
Correct.
I think just seeing that a card game has managed, and a very new card game as well, only recently released, has managed to make its way into the nominations, I think is really good news for Marvel Snap.
Yeah, no, I think I'm sure it's a very validating point for the people at Second Dinner. I mean, they've had multiple moments of validation over the last month, right? The beta, they've got a lot of feedback. It seem like people are enjoying it during the beta, but you never really know when you're releasing product until it's released. Like, you can feel confident that it's going to succeed, and you may have metrics that tell you that I feel very confident it's going to succeed, but until it's out there in the wild, you really don't know, right?
Absolutely.
And so with the game, having a ton of downloads, having people spending money on it, people talking about it on social media, it's just all this validation. And this is just, I think, another piece of validation of, hey, we weren't crazy for working on this for the last 4 years, right? It's actually something that people like.
Yeah, definitely. I just think, it's probably unlikely to win. I mean, I think looking at some of the games there's some games that are probably more popular, some games that, more well-known maybe, but, just the fact that it got nominated, I think is fantastic. And again, if I worked at Second Dinner, I'm sure, they'd be very, very proud, as developers that their baby is kind of getting recognition. So absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, like you alluded to this, obviously during the Game Awards, right? They show trailers for games, they show, clips of the games that are being nominated, etc. So it'll be another exposure point for people watching the Game Awards every year. Over the last several years, the Game Awards have increased in viewership, tens of millions of people at this point that watch it every year. So we'll definitely kind of be some free marketing, if you will, right? People will get exposure to the game. But that just kind of leads me to a sub thought. I'm just curious. Have you been getting like ads for Marvel Snap nonstop all over?
Yeah, I do see them here and there, which, like I said, I've played pretty much every single card game out there now, some of them more than others, but I very rarely see card game ads for some reason. I don't know if the algorithm just doesn't pick it up or if they don't actually, spend that much money on it compared to other sort of gaming and things, but I do see Marvel Snap ads, which, indicates to me that they do have some sort of budget for marketing, but again it obviously depends on where you live, what you're sort of viewing on the internet and things like that, but yeah, I definitely do see ads for it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I don't get a lot of ads for other card games, even though I've played several card games, right? But Marvel Snap, obviously they really have used a very high marketing campaign, so I'm sure they have an allotment from their investors for marketing this game, and I just think it's very interesting. I mean, I think it's working. I have several people that I work with in my day job that they know I've been doing this podcast. They know I like Marvel Snap, right? But with the global release and with this huge marketing campaign, they all say to me, I just kept seeing the ads everywhere, and I knew you liked it, so I finally tried it, right? So yeah. Kind of that repetition, I think, is having an effect on people that are willing to try it out, because I think at least for me, there's kind of this stigma for like mobile game ads. I always see these mobile game ads on YouTube, on social media, and the game isn't what it really looks like it is, and it's not, you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I think card games are a little bit exempt from that, I think, because most card games you can get on your mobile, and they're usually a sort of a sort of port of what, a PC game or a physical card game or something like that. And I do think they're not quite the same sort of, this kind of awful model that you kind of think of when you think of a mobile game. But, Marvel Snap has been accused a little bit of things like that in the past. So, I think it's nice to see that they're putting the money in. I mean, really, my main thought on this would be that I've seen a few card games now with really, really good gameplay, fantastic developer support, but not enough money in advertising, and the games have just completely collapsed. So it's just such a key component to making sure that the game survives. Not every game's going to have the sort of novelty of Hearthstone and just kind of blow up like that did, so that you've got to try and get viewers, players, should I say, some other way. And I think advertising just is the only way to do that. So it's, as much as seeing ads all the time, I'm somebody who really hates ads, but at least when I can see these ads, I'm thinking, every ad that I see, it's somebody else is viewing this and it's bringing more people in. So it's got to be a good thing, really.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with what you're saying. You said an interesting phrase there, kind of the survival of the game, right? And that is the gaming industry today, right? With
Yes.
with games that are ongoing, right? You may have games that are created, indie games, or even AAA games that are kind of a playthrough story adventure, and you play it, you beat it, you're done, right? But most of the game industry, I'd say a higher percentage has moved towards kind of the live service model, right? You want a game that's ongoing, that you can continue to make money off of, etc. And it really is survival of the fittest. So along with that, one of the things that you had wanted to discuss today was this idea of tournaments. Now, I think we both know there's going to be content creator sponsored tournaments, and people are going to do their own thing with Marvel Snap once you can play against people, you can play against friends, you can play against people specifically. I think we all know that's coming, but you kind of brought this idea of, I think, tournaments, kind of how other card games have done that on a larger scale, supported by the developer, cash prizes, things like this. I want to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think it's integral for the survival of the game? How long do you think they can go without this kind of thing to still grow the community, etc.? I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so my background is almost exclusively competitive play, between playing in tournaments in other card games and commentating in tournaments in other card games. Like, those two components have kind of been my life in CCGs. So I'm very interested in the competitive side of things. Without it, I couldn't really commit to a game, I don't think. If Marvel Snap came out tomorrow and said, we're not going to be running official tournaments, it would be a really big issue for me. And even though, as you alluded to there, the community would pick up the slack in some way and they will run their own tournaments, it's not the same. I think things like that, but also just the production value and things like that. Having the main studio make the game with all the assets and everything behind making tournaments, I think, just creates the best environment. Having something called a World Championship or something like that, maybe at some point is just like the dream, I think, for a card game, to have something where it's like, this is the ultimate level of competition, and you can't really have that without developer support. So for me, it is the biggest question mark around Marvel Snap, because actually a lot of complaints people have had about the game, about things like the collection system and other aspects, not being able to select your cards that you unlock and things like that, I don't have as much of an issue with personally. I don't mind really any of the issues that other people have mentioned with Marvel Snap, that the season pass, having to spend money to get that card, things like that. The only time for me it becomes a problem is if you do have tournaments and competitive play, because if you can't build a deck, no matter how much money you invest in the game, to play in a tournament, then it really does kind of it's a bit of a fly in the ointment of this idea of competitive integrity. So not everyone's going to have access to the same cards, and therefore they can't build good decks, and therefore the people with better collections will win the tournament theoretically, and we really don't want that. So I think the way Marvel Snap is, it's very novel, it's unique. I think it's they've tried to do things a different way, and I think it's brilliant, but I do think it's a bit counter to the idea of running tournaments. So again, I'm interested to see how they do it. The format that Ben Broad announced, or in the roadmap, or they've sort of alluded to in the roadmap, I think is much better than the ladder system for tournaments. I think that sort of winning cubes and things like the sort of health bar kind of type deal is really cool. I think it's a good way of doing it. I think it will work well, but I just think the other aspects of the game, like collecting and things like that, need to be up to scratch for tournaments to run. And Marvel Snap, it is a sort of typical mobile game. The games are very quick and easy. You can just sort of pick it up and play. It's nowhere near as complex as some other games, like if you play Mythgard or Magic the Gathering is an obvious example. Those games are far more complex and lend themselves to tournaments more. So I do think that it's not ideal for a tournament setting as a game. But that all being said, again, for me, I really do want to see tournaments, and I'd love to see maybe Second Dinner approach tournaments in a different way to other card games, as they've done with every other aspect of their game. Everything's sort of unique and there's a different spin on it. And I think I'd like to see that maybe with tournaments. Maybe some different formats. There's lots of things they could do to separate themselves. So I would like to see that, but really, just to end my thoughts here, as a baseline, what I would really want to see is just some form of tournament, maybe in 6 to 12 months, just some form of tournament that the developers are supporting, because, as I mentioned earlier, community tournaments are great, but they're just not the same thing as the real deal, really. Yeah,
no, I hear you. I think you said a lot of interesting things that I'd like to dive into a little bit deeper. You bring up an interesting point that I really hadn't thought of. I mean, you've played competitively a lot more than I have, which makes sense that you'd maybe have this thought, but yeah, the collection structure, right, which is kind of integral to the casual and even the ladder play today, right? Um, how you unlock cards, right, and the pool system of card, and the matchmaking, right? All these things kind of intertwine because when you're in pool one, you're matching against other people in pool one, right? So you're kind of building against the same collections. When you're in pool two,
Exactly.
you're building against the other people in pool two, and those pools are much smaller, and then pool three is so much larger and takes so much longer, and so that has been a complaint people have had on the ladder, right? I'm in pool three now. I've only unlocked 5 or 10 cards, and now I'm really struggling because I'm facing people that seem to have every card in pool three. Now, obviously, that's anecdotal. They're not seeing their full collection, right? They may have just unlocked some good synergistic cards together, one after the other. So I think that's interesting. I'd almost wonder with the tournament format. Obviously, if it wasn't something for 6 to 12 months from now, that's a lot of time for people to unlock a lot of cards, right? So that fixes part of the problem. But maybe and in a tournament setting, you could have some kind of ability to use all cards, right? You could build decks from the full deck pool for tournaments, right? That way everybody's on a level playing field. That may be the solution. I don't know. Would you want to see something like that, or would you want to see something different to maybe balance that possible instability?
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. I think the reason that could work is, again, it's not something other card games really do. And I think an idea taken from League of Legends where actually that game, it has an esports scene, but the esports scene is kind of an advertisement for the game. It's not where they make a lot of the money. And I think that could be a similar thing really with Marvel Snap, where a sort of tournament scene or esports scene could be more of a reason to bring people into the game, but not the main way people play. And if you do it like that, then it doesn't dissuade people from still spending money and trying to build the collection and things like that, because a developer might argue that we don't want to give players full collections because then there's no incentive for them to actually try and spend money and collect cards and buy credits and things like that. But realistically, I mean, as long as people aren't only playing in tournaments, that's the only format they're playing, then that's not an issue. So I think that's a really good, elegant solution, and I think it's important to give that level playing field, because even though if tournaments were in 6 months' time, the players who are playing now would have all the cards. Hopefully, there'll be an influx of new players continually over that period and new into the future. And if you join a game, I mean, I stopped playing Magic the Gathering Arena for maybe a couple of months, and then I've come back to it now, and I can just spend a bit of money, and then immediately I've got the cards I need to play in standard, and and playing a standard tournament, so I can just jump right into things like that. So I think that's an important aspect that games need, because tournaments shouldn't only be for veterans. It should also be open to people who have maybe played the game for a month or two and think, I've got an idea here. I want to try out a deck in this tournament. I want to play competitively. So I think that would be a good solution.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Second Dinner has been heralded for with Marvel Snap is the accessibility, right? In gaming in general, but against other card games, right? It's very easy to pick up. The tutorial is very straightforward. You learn the game kind of step by step, how the cards work, the different archetypes. Then you learn the snapping mechanic, right? And it does a really good job of kind of holding your hand and teaching you the game as you go along. Yeah. And with what you're saying with tournaments, right? You want the highest level players, the players that have been playing since day one. But I think Second Dinner has shown us that they want to be accessible in all ways. So ideally, it's something that anybody can join, anybody can participate, anybody has a shot to be the champion or to win a tournament, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing I wanted to kind of get your thought on, just again, this is just, we're pretending we're game designers here, so no wrong answers, but what would you want to see as far as like a deck, like I don't know the proper terminology here, like how many decks you bring to a tournament? Is there a banning system? Is there a card banning system? Is there a deck banning system? Any thoughts there of like how that could work? Would you bring something over from another game? Would you start from scratch? What would you do?
Well, again, speaking to a previous point, I think maybe a unique approach for Marvel Snap would be best. But I mean, the problem is obviously there is no class system, or like a Hearthstone class system or race system or something in this game, so you can't really divide decks like in the same way. So you'd have to maybe have something where you can only have a certain number of shared cards between decks, or maybe something like Magic where you've got maybe a sideboard of some sort. You can put in some tech cards, and that could be interesting because this game in particular has lots of tech cards. So, you could put in your Enchantress or your Cosmo, and then maybe your opponent takes out the aspect of their deck that was vulnerable to that, and there's a bit of a mind game thing going on there. Really, I think what I'd like to see is multiple formats. Again, maybe this is too much to ask so early on, but I'd like to see tournaments with different formats. I think one thing that some of the other card games didn't do right, I mean, Hearthstone, for example, had a very bustling tournament scene, but they used Conquest for so long, and that was the only format they used. And I think if you just try a few different ideas and different formats and see what works, I think that's fine. Again, as long as it's not a huge prize pool tournament that you're experimenting with, I think you can experiment with different ideas, and then whichever one works, just stick with that for a while. But yeah, there's lots of things you can do. I think I would like maybe a one deck format with some sort of sideboard type thing. But again, it's just because I do think it gets a bit clunky if you're saying you can have, in a 12 card deck, you can have nine of the cards have to be different across two decks or something. It just makes it a bit clunky, I think, and it just makes specific decks work well, and then other decks not so much. So, if you had a deck that had a 4-card combo, for example, you need these 4 key components to the deck, and then maybe like Deathwave or something, then you couldn't really bring that and change the cards as much. So I think there's it does need to be looked at in detail, and I'm going to be in some of my upcoming content, I think I'm going to be breaking down some ideas for what we could do for tournaments. But yeah, I think there's lots of things really. I don't think they need to get it exactly right. I don't think the tournament format needs to be perfect. I just think they need to make tournaments really.
Awesome, thank you for sharing thoughts. We've talked about competitive play, but not in this depth before, so I appreciate you bringing your thoughts on that. I think there's a lot that can be done. I like to pretend that somebody at Second Dinner is one of the thousands of listeners to the podcast, right? So hope you're listening. Hope you're taking some notes here as you're listening to Al talk, and we'll see something on the roadmap next year. Obviously, we know we're not going to see anything this year. We know the last features we're getting this year seem to be the collector's tokens and friendly matches, and which are huge. I mean, those are great updates. We need those, and then I think next year's a lot more open. I'm sure they have some faint ideas of what they want to do Q3, Q4 next year, but I'm sure the canvas is open for them to kind of figure out what they want to do on their journey. So, hey all, I wanted to take a quick moment to talk to you about MarvelSnapZone.com. Marvel Snap Zone is a one-stop shop for everything Marvel Snap on the internet. They have new articles nearly every day that cover deck building, strategy, card breakdowns, etc. They have a great collection tracker tool and a deck list builder that works off of that collection tracker so that you can know what decks you can build with your current card collection. They have guides and deck lists for all level of players and all collection level of players. Make sure to go to MarvelSnapZone.com and check it out now. Turning our gears a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about the ladder in Marvel Snap. Now, obviously, this is the only mode to play right now, right? Play ranked ladder. Not that there's necessarily a ranking system beyond level 100, right? But it's kind of like how far can you climb, right? This is the first season that I've said, I'm going to make it to infinite. I personally haven't made it to infinite. I've said that on the podcast before. It's something, I've climbed higher certain seasons than others, but it's not been something I've really tried to push and do. But this season I said, you know what, I want to do it. I want to get there, and that way I'll reset to 70, and then I'll just keep getting there. It's just kind of getting there the first time. That's kind of a challenge for me. And we're only about a week and a half in, but I've already experienced a little bit of burnout from really trying to push for it. I've climbed 35 levels so far, and I'm making good progress, right? I've still got plenty of time left, but I've just found it a little difficult. I'm playing with the deck, I start to climb for a little while, and then it really slows down, and I switch and stuff. So I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit. I'll share my thoughts after, but I'd love to hear, what's your advice? What are your thoughts about when somebody does want to climb? Maybe that's not what you do, but if somebody does want to climb, like, what are your suggestions for switching things up, for avoiding burnout? How do you just keep the focus and keep the grind and make it to the top?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts I've got on this. So I've actually taken a little bit of a hiatus, not recently, but it was a couple of weeks ago from Marvel Snap for a few weeks and for making content for more than that. Because I did experience this. I experienced burnout. I'd played the game pretty much non-stop from picking it up in whenever it was May or June. I can't remember when it was now exactly, but just played it non-stop since then. And I experienced some burnout. And I think mainly just because there wasn't really a goal to aim towards other than Infinite, and so I took a bit of a break and I feel a bit better about it now. I'm more willing to play, but certainly it's something that I've experienced. In terms of how to combat burnout, I think I am different to the average player, really, because I personally like to play one deck a lot and really like, sort of perfect the minute details of the deck, and I'm happy to do that over and over again. And, when I, for example, in other card games, I'll play the Hearthstone season, I'll get to Legend and, like try and qualify for the tournaments there and just play across lots of different card games during the month. So I usually just focus on one deck to be the best I can at that deck. And so when you're trying to be competitive, again, just focusing on that competitive angle, generally it's better to be a master of a deck or a couple of decks than it is to be sort of decent at a lot of them, especially for like tournaments and things like that. So that's the kind of habit I have developed over the years. It doesn't really translate as much to Marvel Snap because, again, there aren't any tournaments. There isn't really any outlet for that, but it's just something I personally still do. But changing decks is clearly the best, I think, solution to burnout. If you maybe change to something you've not played before, or something completely different to what you've been playing. If you've been playing a Sarah Miracle deck, then just change to a Patriot combo deck or something completely different, and then hopefully it should feel a bit like a whole new game. But also, the obvious, just taking breaks from the game. You might find the game really fun and really want to play it, but as with anything, if you play it into the ground, play it just too many hours a day, you will get fed up with it and you will experience that burnout. So taking breaks from playing this game, like I said, I play about 4 or 5 different card games, so I just sort of switch between them, if I need a break from something. It's a bit harder if you're making content, because obviously you have to play the game quite a lot to sort of know what you're talking about and to maybe stream it on Twitch and things like that. But for the average player, I think that should work. And again, I think obviously there's a lot of people in your position where they've maybe tried for Infinite, but they've not really put loads of hours in. I mean, Infinite, really, a lot of it is grinding, putting in the hours, rather than necessarily how good you are. But obviously there is that component to it as well. There is certainly prestige to Infinite, but again, obviously, based on my competitive background, as soon as I start playing a game, I'm looking for the way to abuse the system, to build the best deck, to win as many games as possible. It's just ingrained in me. So I did try and hit Infinite every single season, and I still sort of stick into that. So I'd make sure I play enough to hit Infinite. But then after that, there just isn't anything for me to aim towards. So that is when I sort of struggle to play a bit, if I'm honest. So I try and hit the Infinite just so I've got it in, I can say, oh, well, I've hit it every season, but really, other than that, it is a bit tricky. So again, I just think we need a different game mode, something else to be putting our time into from the developer side of things. And I think when they introduce private matches with people on your friends list, that will help a lot towards that, because it just gives you something else to do. It will, like I said, it will pretty much instantly introduce community tournaments that will give us something else to do. So if you're feeling burnout, it's not entirely your fault for playing too much. I think it's more there being only one way to play. And I think with any game, again, keep harking back to other card games, but if we look at Hearthstone, there are several different ways to play that game. You've got Battlegrounds or Arena or whatever it might be, so just Standard or Wild. So I think they just need to introduce other ways to play the game, So again, bad looks are things that should be coming in the near future. So hopefully that will help. But yeah, generally, just playing other types of decks, completely different. You can tweak a few cards, but then you're still playing the same deck. So I'll just say try something new. Something, I could talk all day about, but I'll just briefly mention is I think one of the great things about Marvel Snap is the brilliant balance of the game. Basically, there are so many decks that are viable. Almost every card in this game, I think, is viable in some sort of competitive. It is really, really well balanced. And maybe some of the people at the very tippy top of competitive play might disagree with me. They might think that they've got the best miracle deck, but I'm in the Discords, I'm watching content creators, and every day somebody says, oh, this deck's broken, and it's a different deck every time, and they can't all be broken. So you know what I mean? I think actually there are very few decks that are broken, especially since the balance changes they made when they've nerfed Mr. Negative and cards like that were outliers. And I just think that the balance is so good, you can really play anything and do well with it. So I think that would be my advice. Just play what looks fun and keep changing up what you're playing.
Yeah, just to call back to a couple of things you said, if every deck is broken, then nothing's broken, right? Which is a good thing in this case, right?
Yes.
I agree with you. I mean, I see people trying out new things all the time. I look at what a lot of content creators are making and playing, and it's just changing every week, every day. Another layer to that is obviously featured locations, new locations, right? People, tweaking decks, playing specific decks that play into or against those locations. And I think that's something unique about Marvel Snap. I'd agree with you. I think changing up is kind of the obvious advice that we would probably both give to people that can help reduce the burnout. Something that I've tried to do is there are a couple of key decks I like to play, right? And sometimes I'll be playing and I'll just go up 5 ranks or 6 or 7, in a playing session where I play for an hour, and that feels really good. But then all of a sudden I'll start to flatline and start to feel a little discouraged. And I like to switch things up in those moments, but it's not like I like to switch things up and then not come back to the deck. I personally like to, I'm going to go just try something different. Think about how things work in a different way, right? Maybe it's something that shares some of the same similarities, but it's half the cards are different, etc. I'm gonna go try something different, and then I'll come back, right? And I feel like I learn things because I see different interactions of cards with my opponent and me, and different situations, different cards playing into different locations, etc. And I feel like I'm just learning how and where and when I should play, right? And so I like to try to bring it back. I don't like to give up on a deck I really like. I like to just switch it up a little bit just to reduce that burnout, just feel like the kind of spurn that, or increase that creativity and that excitement, and then come back and see what I've learned and then apply it to the deck I started with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I also have go-to decks that if I'm losing, I'll go to and just think, I want to win some games, so I'm just going to play some decks and do better with those. So I definitely have decks that I harken back to. But I do think that you've made a very, very good point there in terms of, again, of like being the best you can at the game. So when I say competitive, it doesn't necessarily mean tournaments. It could just mean trying to be win as many games as you can, or as many cubes as you can, should I say, and just be the best that you can be at the game. So one thing to learn how to play against decks, you need to play them yourself, and that is definitely a great way to learn how to counter your opponent's strategies. The only way you'll fully understand what your opponent's playing is if you've played the deck yourself and you know exactly what they're working with, what they're trying to achieve, and then you can best combat it. So it's great advice for getting better at the game, and also, like you said, potentially for burnout as well. But yeah, I think I'd agree with you there. Like I said, I'm not one really for switching decks too much, but again, that's just because of my habit. But I don't think I would advise that for most people.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, I mean, I'll share what I've been playing this season. I've been playing kind of a Patriot combo deck. I've been playing an Arrow Kingpin deck with Sarah, and I've been playing a Destroyer deck with a couple variations. So those are kind of the 3 I've been jumping around. I'm curious if you're willing to share, what has been kind of your go-to deck this month? Yeah, so
really with when a new card releases, I mean, when Black Panther released, like everyone sort of has just kind of jumped on it because he is a strong card. It's clearly a strong card, so they've kind of started to play that. And when that happened, I like to immediately just try and play the counter to that first of all. For the first few days, maybe a week or so, just play the counter to that deck. So play Shang-Chi or Arrow, other counters to it to stop the combo with Black Panther and Arnim Zola, things like that. And then that tends to do quite well. So I start off by doing that. And then when people start playing the main deck Black Panther as much, and they start to counter it, then you kind of go a level above and you counter the counter. And it kind of progresses like that until a few weeks in, maybe where we are now, where things kind of peter out, and then you just kind of go back to playing, sort of what you want to play. So, for the first few weeks I was kind of doing that. I was just trying to counter those decks. And then after that, I've been playing a few different things. I mean, I too have been playing a Patriot combo deck, where, just because I think they're quite fun, really. I quite enjoy Patriot. And, so I've been playing that. You just throw it on Patriot, Mystique, and Onslaught, and use Magic to extend the game. And it's actually a deck that can use Adam Warlock, which is nice. Yeah, so I've been playing the Patriot combo deck. So that's been one thing I've been playing, but mainly for fun. But the deck I kind of mainly go back to as a powerful deck that will pretty reliably give me wins, and I really enjoy it. It's a fun deck. It's just Sarah Miracle. I think it's probably still the strongest deck in the format. It's just a really, standard, powerful, fun deck to play, and just getting such high numbers and being able to spam your cards just generally feels quite good. So that's what I've been playing. But I do experiment with things. A deck that I played very little of in my sort of collection building. I think because I unlocked Mystique quite late in my collection, I didn't get to play Cerebro very much, because really Cerebro, you really need Mystique for that to be good.
Yep.
It's essential. In every single deck you'll see those two cards together, really. So I've been playing Cerebro, so the 3 cost Cerebro. It's probably the most standard version, and I found that actually really enjoyable, really fun. You get to play lots of tech cards like Armor, Cosmo, Killmonger, and then Professor X is a really, really enjoyable card to play. So big blowouts. So I've been playing that deck as well, and maybe not the most powerful, but it's certainly a strong deck that can win games like pretty much any other deck. So that's what I've been playing, really.
Nice. Yeah, Mystique was my third to last card I unlocked, so I am there with you. I've been trying to catch up on my Mystique play in the last few weeks since I've unlocked Mystique. So, well, awesome. Appreciate you talking about that. I think there's probably a lot of you out there listening that are making the climb, and it can be a grind, right? You don't have to do it. It's obviously not required. It depends on if you want to do it or not, but I think it can be fun to do. But I think switching it up, trying new things, doing things like Al says, where you kind of counter the meta with new cards or new locations, and then you counter the counter. I mean, I think a lot of people follow that strategy, and that can be a good strategy to climb. Okay, going to our last topic today. This is something that's just been on my mind, maybe not yours, but something I've been thinking about, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. So a few patches ago, we had this change to the variant rarity system. So now we have, I forget the terminology they use, so I apologize, but essentially we have like rare and super rare, something to that effect. About 75% of all the variants in the game are in the lower tier rarity, and 25% of the variants are in the higher tier. The lower rarity costs 700 gold. They used to cost 750 for any variant, and the higher rarity variants cost 1,200 gold. Obviously this, it's everyone's choice whether they spend money or not, or they just use the gold that they get in the game. But I know that, I, for several months, have kind of saved a lot of gold, and there's been certain variants that I've been interested in buying that I chose not to, and that's on me. But now they're super rare variants or whatever, right? So now they cost more than they did before, and that can be a little discouraging. Obviously, this may not affect newer players who just started at the global release. But I don't know. I guess my general thought, and I'm interested to hear if you agree, disagree, is 1,200 just feels like a lot with how that translates to dollars. You're spending essentially what could be like a meal, like going out to eat a meal somewhere to get like a different skin of a card. So I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think the change is okay? Do you think because it doesn't help you, it's purely cosmetic, it doesn't really matter? What are your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, so I mean, funnily enough, because of the value of the pound at the moment, it costs more. It probably costs more relatively for me to buy variants than it does for you, actually. So the pound sterling. So it's very expensive to buy skins. You're right in saying that it's not at the top of my agenda, just because realistically, the way I would be happy sitting here playing with bits of paper. Do you know what I mean? Like scraps of paper, and I have done with other card games. If it was black and white sort of numbers on a screen, I would be happy doing that. So I'm in the very small minority of people who would be fine with that. But I do like looking at the variants. I enjoy the art. It's definitely a draw to the game. It's very important for the average player to like what they're looking at. And I think there's a couple of things really about this. First of all, any sort of price increase, if the game started out and this is the cost of things, I think people would be less, have a less of an issue with it, just psychologically, because whenever you increase the price of anything, you just feel bad, especially if you've been hoarding gold, and then it just devalues your gold. It's not a very nice feeling. But again, more importantly than that, I think you're absolutely right in saying that the prices just seem a bit high. I think maybe it's a bit of a a mentality thing, which is, I mean, a bit sad to say, but I mean, we saw with Nexus events, a lot of people probably won't know what they are now and what they were going to be. But you can look back and read through the history. I think it's interesting to know the history of Marvel Snap. But Nexus events were going to be extortionately expensive, and they were rightly scrapped, and that's fine. They acted quickly, but maybe it's a bit of a hangover there, where for whatever reason, second dinner, the prices, they just priced things a bit too high. But I've got to think they're a business. They have their people who work in the background working at what the best prices are, and they've obviously determined that they think this is the best. This is the best price, and this is what they're going to make the most money with. Obviously, if it's priced too high, fewer people will buy it. So I think they must have deemed that this is the right one. But as we've seen from Nexus events, they can get that wildly off. And I personally, I think I'm with a lot of people here like yourself, and thinks it's just too much. 1,200 gold for a skin on a single card. It is too much. And like you said, it's a cosmetic. You're not forced to buy it. It's whether it's worth it to you. But there is a bit of a feels bad thing where you're looking at two skins. Some of the by design, some of the coolest variants, just in skins. Some of the coolest variants do cost 1,200. And I think there was the Adam Warlock one that I bought before the price went up, and I looked, and then afterwards it was one of the super rare, and I was thinking, well, it's a good job I bought it then, because it is a really cool variant. But yeah, it does feel quite bad that they're so expensive, and that again, when things were all equal before, now just certain arbitrarily decided skins cost more. So cost more. So yeah, I think it feels pretty bad. I'm not a huge fan of it. I think that. Again, I can only hope that the analysis they've done is that this is the best way to keep the game going, and this is best for the game, that they price it this way, and that people who are willing to spend it. But I do suspect, just based on my opinion, that it is priced a bit too high. I don't think they'll change it now. I don't think they'll really change things like this, because there isn't a massive uproar like there was with Nexus events. People aren't going to go crazy in the Discord and things over it. I think it's just kind of leaves a bit of a bad taste in your mouth, and people are less willing to get the skins. So it's a shame. For me personally, I've been at the end of the collection track for I think maybe about a month or so now. So maybe a bit longer. So effectively everything I unlock now, I'm unlocking variants, getting credits, and I'm basically I don't really have to spend money on the game anymore. But at the same time, my understanding is you can't get super rare variants from the collection track. So even for someone, and again, that's obviously by design, for someone like me who's completed the game in a sense, or completed the collection, I would still have to spend money to get those usually. So again, it is a little bit, if I've built up all these credits that I can't spend on anything, and I still have to spend money to get these, variants, it does feel a little bit bad.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your thoughts. I think kind of just bringing this part of the conversation to a close, I think you share a lot of good points. It can feel bad. Obviously, a phrase we say, first world problems, right? We're talking about, I don't want to spend as much money on a picture in a video game, right? So that's totally up to us, and I want to put that into perspective. So, this definitely isn't a real world issue that's really negatively affecting anybody too bad. But I do think there's that psychology to it that you stated. It can feel bad when the price increases when it was cheaper before. Who knows? There could be sales on gold in the future, right? Sales on variants. They can do lots of things, right? That can incentivize people to buy more, and then the price goes back to the normal price, and then people, end up buying more still, etc. There's a lot that can happen there. And, even though you maybe can't get all the rarest ones in the collection tracker, they are, I would say, fairly generous with unlocking them between the season pass and the caches on the collection tracker. You can unlock a few variants a week if you play enough, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm definitely not complaining about that. I appreciate that. It's one of my favorite things to unlock, right? Is to get a new variant and kind of get it for free, if you will, just by playing the game. So appreciate that. Well, awesome. Al, really appreciate you being on. Every month we have one or two of these kind of variety episodes when we're not at the end or the beginning of a season, right? And we're not right on a patch or anything. So appreciate you being here for this discussion, sharing a lot of great insights on a lot of these topics. Before we go, I just want to give you a chance. You're starting up, like you say, you had a kind of a lull or a break from creating some content for Marvel Snap, but you're going to be starting that back up, or you have started that back up. Let the listeners know where they can find that content and how they can best support you.
Yeah, so I'm at Twitter. I'm at X. You can call me Al, and it's you can call me Al, not you can call Meal or you can call me AI or whatever else it might look like. But yeah, you can catch me there just for the occasional tweet and my thoughts. I don't use it that much really, but mainly it would be Twitch and YouTube. But again, primarily YouTube. It's just X. You can call me Al. Like I said, when I was making content, it was one video every other day, so it was quite a big turnaround. And I do try and make my content a bit different to maybe some of the other content out there. Not that isn't great content, but it's just maybe a bit more tailored to what I'm good at. And it's more sort of discussions and this sort of style content really, rather than like gameplay or anything like that. It's more just sort of my thoughts on news stories in the game or what the best decks are or things like that. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, you can catch me on YouTube. And then I am hoping to stream on Twitch again at some point, hopefully in the near future. But again, my focus really is YouTube. But it's all X. You can call me Al.
Awesome. Al, thank you again so much for being here.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Listeners, thank you for tuning in as always. If you haven't followed or subscribed to the podcast, make sure to do that so you don't miss any future episodes. And as always, we will catch you in the next episode. Can't Stop Snapping is a podcast written, recorded, produced, and hosted by Michael Thurman. Thanks for listening. Thank you.